the extrinsic muscles of the forelimb, the muscles of the hind limb. The usual extrinsic muscles are present in the cat as well, but then some of them, they have little different extent than the dog. Basically, your pectoral muscles, they extend further, not only onto the humerus, but extend further to the antebrachium as well. Then another major difference in the forelimb extrinsic muscles is presence of the clavicle within the brachiocephalicus muscle. As we can see, like this whitish line which indicates clavicular intersection that we observe in the dog. As we separate the brachiocephalicus muscle from rest of them, I'm going to put my finger underneath that in order to palpate the bone which is present inside. And the bone which can be palpated right here at the clavicular intersection within the muscle, that is the clavicle. In most of the cats, that bone can be palpated very easily. So at the place where you usually see the clavicular intersection, I'm now touching the bone from inside, and we almost have exposed that bone on the other side as well. So if you look at this structure here, the white thing inside, that is the clavicle that can be seen very easily, which is present within the bone right here. Okay. That is the bone which is present within the brachiocephalicus, which is completely absent in the dog, which is basically part of the pectoral girdle, and that bone will definitely appear in the radiograph, as we see the radiographs of the cat associated like in the forelimb. The other extrinsic muscle that we see now, after looking at the brachiocephalicus and after we looked at the clavicle which is located within the brachiocephalicus, the omotransversalis is seen here. Usual muscle, not very different from the dog, but then its insertion on the spine can be seen very clearly. Then we see the cranial part of the trapezius and the caudal part of the trapezius. As we know, in the cat, the dorsal border of the scapula always projects slightly higher than the spine. These muscles have slight different configuration than the dog. The thoracic part of the trapezius as well as the cervical portion of the trapezius, they look a little larger as compared to the dog. This is the caudal extent of the thoracic part of the trapezius. The muscle goes all the way towards the thoracolumbar fascia. It covers part of the latissimus dorsi as well. The cutaneous trunca is also present, but in this dissection that has been removed completely. So we can see the next extrinsic muscle, that is your latissimus dorsi. So far we looked at the brachiocephalicus, omotransversalis, trapezius muscle, the latissimus dorsi, and now as we come to the ventromedial aspect, we look at the pectoral muscles. Now we can see distinction between all the three pectoral muscles on the chest. That is the ventral midline, which indicates the position of the sternum, that is the xiphoid cartilage of the sternum, and that is the manubrium of the sternum. So from between these 2 points, we see the pectoral muscles are attached to the sternum and they are going towards the arm. And so we have the deep pectoral muscle, which is partly covered by the superficial pectoral. That is your deep pectoral muscle going towards the arm, but then in the cat it is going to go further down toward the antebrachium as well. Demarcation between the superficial and deep pectoral can be done easily, and from here onward, or here to cranial aspect, we have the superficial pectoral muscle, which would then be divided into descending pectoral and the transverse pectoral. Let's look at the pectoral muscles then. The muscles which have been divided from each other by further blunt dissection. We just made sure that the edges of the muscle are dissected out so we can differentiate those from each other. So now from the xiphoid cartilage to the manubrium sterni, the ascending pectoral muscle, which is also called your deep pectoral muscle, can be seen. Part of that is covered by the transverse pectoral muscle, and then further cranially we have the descending pectoral muscle. So we can differentiate those three from each other: the descending, the transverse, and the ascending, which is deep pectoral muscle. When we combine both of them, as usual, as we call them in the dog, in the cat as well, those would be superficial pectoral and the deep pectoral muscle. Okay, so these are all the extrinsic muscles that can be seen from outside. Now to see a couple of other extrinsic muscles, we need to now transect the trapezius, both of the heads, and separate those from the spine, so we can look at the muscles like rhomboideus as well as the different parts of the rhomboideus, and furthermore we can also look at the look at the serratus ventralis muscle. So here I transect the trapezius. I transect it or separate it along the cut it along the spine of the scapula. Part of the omotransverse areas as well be taken off. We reflect everything dorsally along the dorsal midline. So it will now be showing the dorsal aspect of the shoulder. So here we have the dorsal part. As we know, like the neck of the cat is shorter than the dog, and so here we see different parts of the rhomboideus as well. The one which is located more laterally, that is your rhomboideus capitis, rhomboideus cervicis. Now the muscles from both sides, we need to differentiate them. That is the dorsal midline here. So rhomboideus cervicis, rhomboideus capitis, and rhomboideus thoracis. But again, there is no much difference between the dog and cat. All of them are going to be in the same manner. Transecting the pectoral muscles quickly would allow us to go into on the medial aspect of the forelimb. So we're going to transect the pectoral muscles, and then after transecting all of the pectoral muscles, now here the clavicle is in our way to transect the pectoral muscles, so I'm going to go on one side of the clavicle so those can be transected easily. Transecting the latissimus dorsi. And then here we see the serratus ventralis. Let's look at the intrinsic muscles of the forelimb. Here there are some of the differences that we must notice here. Some of those muscles are already been transected in this preparation. This is the lateral view, some of the extrinsic muscles and the intrinsic muscles here. So we still have the cranial aspect, the caudal aspect. So from here we have the we have the trapezius as well as part of the omotransverse areas. After reflecting that, you can see the supraspinatus muscle. Caudally, we have the deltoideus muscle with both acromion part as well as the spinous part. Reflecting the deltoideus would reveal the infraspinatus muscle. Again, those things are quite similar to the dog. On the medial aspect, we have the subscapularis. Again, very similar to the dog. The teres major muscle, much similar, no much difference there. Now let's look at the muscles of the brachium. Here we have some of the differences to be noticed. The triceps brachii, which is one of the largest extensor of the cubital joint. Usual heads are present. We have the lateral head of the triceps, long head of the triceps, and then we have the medial head of the triceps. The medial head of the triceps would be revealed after we separate some of those structures there, and that is your medial head of the triceps. That is the long head, and that is the medial head. Regarding the accessory head is not as such accessory head of the triceps, but then it is more part of the medial head. And so what we can say, there is no accessory head in the cat as it is distinctly present in the dog, but it looks like there is some extension of the medial head of the triceps which is comparable to the accessory head as in the dog. The muscles of the forearm, here we need to notice some of the differences. The brachioradialis muscle. This muscle is fairly large in the cat as compared to the dog. Maybe because of the better ability of pronation and supination or rotation of the forelimb. Along with that, you will have your cephalic vein as well as superficial branch of the radial nerve running along with that. Then we have the extensor carpi radialis, which is more on the medial side here. The extensor carpi radialis in the cat is also believed to be divided into two different parts, rather only single part as it is in the dog. Then we have the common digital extensor. Common digital extensor secured by the extensor retinaculum here, going to each functional digit. Okay. Then we have the lateral digital extensor, where it is a little different than the dog. Now the lateral digital extensor looks fairly large in the cat as compared to the dog. In the dog, the muscle goes to digit number 3, 4 and 5, but in the cat it goes to all 4 functional digits. it goes to digit number 2, 3, 4 and 5 in case of the cat. Then more laterally we have the ulnaris lateralis, helping in slight abduction of the carpus. That we can see as we pull the tendon, it moves the carpus laterally, and it is the abduction of the carpus. As we go more backward now, we are now looking at the muscles which are located on the caudomedial aspect. That's the caudal surface of the forelimb. That is caudolateral, that is caudomedial. So now we are looking at the muscles which are basically the flexors of the digit and the carpus. Okay, so the first muscle we see here after we looked at the ulnaris lateralis here. These are different parts of the DDF that we'll look at slightly later. Now we have the flexor carpi ulnaris with both of the heads. As usual, they are similar in the cat. They also have this muscle also has two heads, the ulnar head as well as the humeral head. Then we go more medially, we see the superficial digital flexor, then the flexor carpi radialis. Apart from these muscles, everything there is part of the deep digital flexor. So the deeper here is the deep digital flexor, superficial digital flexor, and the flexor carpi ulnaris with both of the heads of the flexor carpi ulnaris. As we come now on the slightly more on the medial aspect, this limb is almost been rotated at certain extent. So we can see here we have the flexor carpi radialis. Between the extensor carpi radialis and flexor carpi radialis, we have the pronator muscle, much larger as compared to the dog, that is the pronator teres. Then we see the extensor carpi radialis again. Between the extensor carpi radialis and the common digital extensor, we can see the supinator muscle here. Then as we lift up the common digital extensor and separate the lateral digital extensor, we see the abductor pollicis longus. So what we have here, we have the common digital extensor, abductor pollicis longus, going over the extensor carpi radialis and then going more on the medial side to go to digit number 1. At the same time, we have your brachioradialis muscle covering everything. As it goes more distally close to the carpus, the muscle also becomes a little bit widespread, it becomes more flat and it becomes more widespread. So it is much better developed in the cat as compared to the dog. Okay, as we trace those muscles further distally, we can see the tendons of these muscles. Let's go to the other specimen so we can see some of those structures more clearly and we can compare those again. So this is the common digital extensor muscle. More medial to that, we have the extensor carpi radialis, which is covered by the abductor pollicis longus, the obliquely running muscle covering the extensor carpi radialis. Then we have the common digital extensor, lateral digital extensor, ulnaris lateralis muscle, and here we see the tendons of the lateral and common digital extensor. The lateral digital extensor tendons are also similar in number as compared to the common digital extensor. So we have the 4 tendons from the common digital extensor going straight to each functional digit, and we have the lateral digital extensor also has 4 tendons located below that going to each of the functional digit. In the digits of the cat, the distinct feature that we will see, which is different from the dog, is the dorsal elastic ligaments, which are very well formed. In one of the hind limbs, we have dissected the dorsal elastic ligaments. In this preparation, though as the structures in the forelimb and hind limb going to be like similar below the carpus and below the tarsus, we can see some of those structures in the distal limb of the or distal hind limb as well. This is the dorsal view. We can see the long digital extensor muscle, which is similar to the common digital extensor in the forelimb. In this preparation, we see the same thing, the common digital extensor. Then we see here is the dorsal elastic ligament. More on the lateral side, there is another short one seen right here. The one which is present here is the short dorsal short part of the dorsal elastic ligament, and the one which is seen in this preparation or in this digit, that is the long part of the dorsal elastic ligament. In the cat, when the digits are full, or when the distal interphalangeal joint is fully extended, the distal phalanx remains on the lateral side of the process, and that's how they can achieve full retraction of the claw, which is not really possible in the dogs. The dogs do have dorsal elastic ligaments, but then they are symmetrical. Both of those are present on both sides of the phalanx rather on one side of the phalanx.